Welcome. Today I woke up and got reminded I had an interview with Lily Hope, and we had a nice chat via Zoom, and I guess it'll be on the Sea Alaska website. They'll have a link to that interview. So I didn't have my first cup of coffee even, so I don't know how it turned out. But please go and check that out. It was fun to chat with them this morning. Lily has got a great energy. So today I will continue my lattice shape. It's coming out pretty good. I love the over 4 rows because it seems like you're just speeding along. I've been experiencing a toothache, so it's kind of slowing me down. But we'll keep going. I want to tell you a story about how designs possibly became so important to how we interacted with our environment. And so I got this story from I think it was this John Swanton book. It's either Skidegate dialect or Masset dialect. I'm not right sure right now, but like I say, they're probably Reader Digest versions because these clan stories belong to clans, and that was their intellectual properties. So even when he came along in 1900, John Swanton, he was probably getting stories, but they wouldn't have shared all of the details. So I get to read those stories over and over again. But anyway, I'll continue weaving and telling stories. Okay, so I'm here, and I know my pattern is 2 black, 1 blue, 2 black, 1 blue, 2 black, 1 blue. So I was going to tell you a story about how important the patterns are, and that the patterns carry power. So this story starts with a mother and a son. They are off on their own, and I really can't remember why that is, but they are off on their own, and the son is growing up quite fast, and he goes out hunting birds, and he catches a wren, and with his bow and arrow, he shoots the birds. And so he grows up, and his mother skins the birds and creates bird hide garments. So one morning the son goes to his mother and he says, I'm going to go and sit on the go onto the horizon and look for me. So the mother goes and she looks out onto the horizon, and there sits these clouds, and they are the color of the robe, the bird robe that the son had gone out that morning wearing the robe of that color. So she goes and she sees in the horizon the clouds with the colored formation of what he had been wearing. So then he comes back home and he said, Mother, did you see me? And his mother said, yes, I saw you. You were you look good. So then the next morning he does the same thing. He goes out, he puts a different bird coat on with a different color combination, and he goes out and he sits there, and his mother goes to see him on the horizon, and there sits these clouds with the same color as that coat that he had gone out wearing. So he comes back and he says, "Mother, did you see me?" And his mother said, "Yes, I saw you. You look very good, very fine." So he does it several times. And so then Master Carpenter comes, and he takes a liking to the mother. So apparently, one night he comes, and when the son wakes up, there is Master Carpenter, and he says, in the story, he says that he becomes the father. He becomes the stepfather. Anyway, the Master Carpenter says, "Here, come here, let me paint you up." So he painted him in, I imagine, face paint, and then the son goes out to the horizon with the face paint, his face painted. And he goes out again, out to the horizon, and the face paint changes the weather. So I know I'm telling you this story in a very abbreviated way, but I really like the story because it talks about the control over the weather by designs, control over the clouds by designs. And so at the end, the son goes away, tells his mother, I'm leaving, and but look for me in the horizon, and if you see such and such pattern, then you'll know it's me. And the mother says, "Yes, I will look for you, and I will throw feathers upon the water for you." So it's just a really cool story to know that these earlier, probably the very earliest robes around here were bird skin robes, and to have the story that the bird skin robe was used and could control the weather. And then when the Master Carpenter comes with and designs his face, and those painted designs could also determine the weather. And the weather is very important to us. I mean, nowadays our feet never touch the ground. We always have our shoes, and we have our clothes, and we have our hair cut fashionable, and we never really consider our partnership with the earth. But we still have that partnership. We may have lost its language, the earth, listening, hearing the earth and its language, its unique language, but it is still with us. And so I love those stories where we were connecting to our environment and in hopes of, with our art and our behavior, we hope to always be partnership with Earth and our weather. So the likeness and art is, like they say, we don't have a word for art in our language because art was all around us. Our art was our way of communicating with the supernatural, with the spirits, with each other, with our neighbors. art was a prevailing part of our existence. And so, no, we didn't have a special word for art. So one story I also favor because of the way it talks about images. And so we've pretty much personified made our, let me see, I better think about this pattern. I don't want to make a mistake. Okay, so this story that I'm talking to you about is about a supernatural being. And I've called him the monarch of the sea. I've called him the sea being. And there's many names. I think the Tlinkits would call him Gade. And but in our stories, he comes through with several names. And one of my favorite names for him is Ginga. And Ginga was ruler of the waves and weather. Waves, water, and weather, and wind. So he's an all-powerful being. And so one day he said to the people or the creatures in the ocean, he said, "Make a likeness of me." So all of the creatures under the ocean said, okay, so they tried making a likeness of this wonderful, amazing, all-powerful sea being. So the deer tried it, and Ginga did not like it. The porcupine tried it. Ginga did not like it. Oh, well, I guess it was open to everybody trying to produce an image or a likeness of the sea being. So the porpoise tried it, and then the porpoise, his image was successful. And so the sea being gave him a favor for producing a likeness of him. So in that story, I think it's just amazing, because when we go out into our canoes in the old days, we went there for trade, for food gathering, for war. There were many reasons why we went into we traveled by canoe. And so it was so important to have calm waters and weather for all of those activities that we did in our canoe. So it only makes sense that we would want to be looked at favorably by the sea being that controlled the weather. And so I just love that story, because we are talking about art. We're talking about an image that represented the sea being, and the sea being wanted to approve that. He either approved it or he disapproved it. And so one of the most prevalent patterns in Nahin robes is the diving whale. And it crosses that very conventionalized pattern of the diving whale, crosses boundaries. The Tlinkits have the diving whale design, Haidas, Tsimshians, and it's always consistent. It always is a pattern that is consistent. And I always feel like the reason why that is a prevalent Nahin chief's robe pattern is because it worked. It was approved originally by the sea being, and that we want to appease the sea being and smooth the waters. So we paint him or her, onto our canoes, onto the boxes that we would sit on when we were on those canoes, and on our robes. So the sea being saw that we honored him, and hopefully he would smooth those waves for us. And we were able to come home with successful hunts, successful battles, successful trades. So there's two very specific stories about how patterns we tried to control our environment and influence our environment with the patterns that we used on all of our things. So in my research, I also researched John Wallace. It was a carver, and he was interviewed by Viola Garfield from the University of Washington, and she eventually wrote a book, but she had all these unpublished notes. And so when I was down there studying at the Burke Museum in their collection, I also got to see a lot of the unpublished notes that Garfield had left behind. And in her interview with John Wallace, he tells a similar story about the children. Well, okay, I'll tell you this story. And again, it's very abbreviated. But so in John Wallace's story, there's a group of children from North Island, and they go onto a canoe, and they go over to Skidegate area, and the canoe capsizes, and so those children go under the water, and they have a supernatural experience, and they come up with knowledge and of the things they learned down there under the water. So they eventually get back into their canoe and go back home. And their parents, they came from North Island up here in Haida Gwaii, northern Haida Gwaii. So they went back to their parents in North Island, and the parents questioned them about what was happening, and their children talked about their adventure. But then one of the siblings says, tomorrow I'm going to go out to the horizon. Look for me there. So the parents go out and look out into the horizon, and there sits clouds of the same color and pattern as the robes that the robe that the sibling had gone out and worn. And then so all the siblings take turns each morning. One sibling would go to the parents and say, go to the horizon, I'm going there, and look for me there. And then they would, and then they would see the cloud formations that were similar to the robes that were being worn by the children. So the last one goes out to the horizon, and she comes back and she says, how did you like my costume? And that's the word that John Wallace had used. But so the mother said, I really liked really liked it. And I think and then so that was a story very similar to the one that was told to by Swanton about the patterns and going off into the water and the sky and influencing the clouds and the weather. Let's see, I do have another story. I'm kind of slow at weaving, telling my story today. Sorry. But as you can see, I'm doing the over 4, and it's really important to handle your hands very gently. And every once in a while, especially with ravenstail, you really need to like shake it out and do some yoga and shoulder stretches. And but I just want to say that it goes quite fast when you're taking 4 warps at every twine. But it's really important not to compress and squish up your twine. So it's really important to hold your hands really loose. So let's see another story. Johnny Wallace told this story. And he probably learned it because his stories all come from Haida Gwaii, and his clan came from North Island area. So it's probably a Dodden's story. But anyway, so there was a father, and he told his daughter to go, I think, to fetch water. And he said, don't tarry, don't take your time. So the daughter was not a very obedient person, and she met a frog, and she spent hours tormenting that frog. She'd stuff straw into its mouth and just all kinds of not good things to do to a frog. So that happened twice, 2 days in a row. And in the 3rd day, she saw someone came and interrupted her torturing the frog, and he said, "Come with me, follow me." And so the girl followed him. And so the person said, "Come with me." And he followed, the girl followed the person under the sea. And so the father discovered the daughter missing and looked all over the beach and couldn't find his daughter. So he was running up and down one beach looking for her, and this old woman who was gathering sea cucumbers on the beach said that you're not going to find her on land. So then the father went and got a canoe, and he went and the canoe went under the sea, and he found the sea being, the ruler of the sea. He found him, and asked about his daughter. And the sea being said she was cruel to a living thing, and so I'm not going to let you take her from me. And but I will give you this cloak, this robe, in memory of her, and in memory of her cruelty to a sea being or to a creature. So then the father took the robe home, and that was like a covenant with the sea being. And I like that story too, because the robe is a gift from the supernatural, and that's pretty much what we think about these robes. That they are living, they are powerful, and in the past we thought the patterns on them could control the weather. That's no surprise to me, because I've always been told that our Skaga, our medicine men, were expected to control the weather. So these stories show you how they do that with patterns. So I really, really like finding the stories in our oral histories that help us understand how important these ropes were to our culture. So thank you very much for tuning in today, and sorry, I guess I was weaving off to I was weaving way off to out of the picture while I was telling that story. So sorry. Maybe I'll do it again. If not, you'll see this. Okay, bye.